Hi everyone. I apologize for background noise. In this case, music this time, not traffic. So, and I have been reading and responding to all of your wonderful posts from week 2, and I think you're all getting a good grasp of the integral AQual model versus the up from Eden model that we studied in week 1. And but I found myself wanting to sort of emphasize some aspects of the integral AQual model that might not leap out from it. And at some point I need to make a video, I think, or in-depth video on the pre-trans fallacy, which I think is a really key part of Wilber's thinking, and it's also a place where I think he's open to criticism in a lot of places, but in the pre-trans fallacy, that is where some particular criticisms really will focus, and we'll see why, and I think you'll get it. But aside from that, AQual, of course, stands for all quadrants, all lines. So first of all, we've got an evolutionary model, right, which is, at this point, has become the spiral in spiral dynamics. And what Wilber is saying is, spiral dynamics, the evolutionary stages of spiral dynamics are reflected in the quadrants, right? So he's going to talk about each level of spiral dynamics, the colors and everything, and what characterizes them. But each one of these levels is reflected or expressed in the 4 quadrants. And what does that mean? So we have 4 quadrants, and the primary distinction of the quadrants, I would say, is between inner and outer. So the left-hand side of the quadrants basically refers to our inner experience, our inner development. Okay? So we would label that as subjective in the modern age. And the right-hand side represents the objective or the exterior. So obviously there's relationships between exterior and interior, but he's making this division. And then the second division is between the individual and the collective, right? So then you get your quadrants, basically. So you've got upper left is my personal interior, and he's saying then in the lower left that there's a collective interior, a collective in subjectivity. And on the right, upper right, there's the exterior, which is the level of third person it's, and that's what science studies, of course, because science tries to be objective. But there's also a collective level of it's. Okay, so society level, groups of it's get together in that quadrant, right? So the development that happens in the spiral is reflected in each of those quadrants. So if we drew the quadrants, then you would see lines of development progressing from the center on outwards, lines of evolution that are have manifestations in each of these quadrants. So there's an interior manifestation of these developments. There's an exterior manifestation. How does this interior get reflected in terms of exterior, say, behavior? I suppose it's mostly, in terms of the individual, then it would mostly be in terms of behavior. In other words, what do you do? Okay, as seen from the outside, as seen from a perspective outside of you, the it perspective, you as an it, what do you do? And then there's a collective level, an interior collective level, evolution, and a exterior collective level. What does our society do? Our culture do? How is it physically manifested out in the objective level? So the spiral is reflected in each of the quadrants, right? So it's what he's doing is adding a sort of complexity to the spirals. We have the spiral itself, but then he's saying it's manifested as everything is in the universe is in each of these quadrants. Basically, that's what he's saying. So, in other words, he's adding a further level of complexity to the spiral dynamics model, and he does more than that. So then he starts to talk about lines and states and stages. Okay. So there are in each of these quadrants there are lines of development. So there isn't just one line of evolution. There's different kinds of lines of evolution in each quadrant. Okay, and those in the picture that I just sent you are depicted on the bottom right. This is the cognitive line, for example, which is the one he focuses on most. No coincidences there, actually. But there are other kinds of lines of development, emotional lines, and all kinds of other lines of development that he calls out. And so that is a further complexity. Okay, we start with let's say that we start with this idea of the evolutionary model, and then we further add a level of complexity, and that model gets expressed in different quadrants. And then we say that expression actually doesn't just follow single lines. We can add in a further distinction, which is that one can see evolution in these different kinds of lines of development within each of the quadrants. Okay, and then there is this further distinction of states and stages, which can get us confused, actually. So stages are what we're talking about in spiral dynamics. Okay, all of these colored stages. So there's stages, and they, in Wilber's view, are evolutionary and involve work and dependence on the prior stage, and evolution is actually doing work here. It's progressing, but it's not sort of it involves effort on the part of individuals and society to move these things forward. Okay. Those are states. Sorry, stages. Okay. But there are states of consciousness as well as stages of consciousness. States of consciousness happen. They don't necessarily require work, although many of us do kinds of work in terms of spiritual practice, meditation, and yoga, and all kinds of spiritual practices. And in the process of doing that, we may experience states of consciousness. Okay, progressing all the way to not the full sort of non-dual experience, and these are called out in these terms that in Hinduism would be related to the various bodies, like the mental body and the causal body and whatnot. But at any given, so in spiral dynamics, any given stage, you can still experience all of these states, right? So you can be red and still experience all of the states of consciousness. And that might just happen, or it may be because of something that you did or related. But these things are temporary. They come and go. These states of consciousness come and go. But these ones are more stable. You find yourself at the green stage. Your center of gravity is there. And there's a definite time sequence here. Then you're hanging out there in that particular stage of consciousness. In that stage of consciousness, you can experience all of these states, all the way up to a full-blown non-dual experience, where you're experiencing the kind of enlightened mind, the unity of things. That's a state of consciousness. So he's got these two things going on. So it's like there's a gazillion things going on in the A-qual model, basically. So they're all interrelated. It makes it highly nonlinear.